Walter, I think you know I would like to believe in God. And I'm told that at the end of the day, when all the philosophical arguments are done and the fights between atheists and scientists and philosophers are done, that you can always rely upon religious experience, that thing that you feel internally that'll be the ultimate proof for you as an individual. I've never had a religious experience. I don't know what it's like to feel that way. I feel deprived because I can't use that to prove God exists.
That's unfortunate. Religious experiences are actually kind of fun. I've had some myself in my younger days, and they really are enjoyable. You can feel that God is there. You can feel comfortable. You can feel secure. You can feel like the world loves you and you're part of it. It's a great kind of experience to have.
When did you have yours?
When I was a teenager in a group that was a Bible study that I was going to, people want to believe in God. And I think a lot of people are in your situation. They want to believe in God. And so they go about trying to find out about it. And if you hang around with the right people and the music is really good and the Bible's got some great stuff in it, and pretty soon you can find yourself really believing it. And when you believe it, you can have these experiences that back it up.
What was your feeling at the time? What did you feel like?
I felt like God was in the room and calling me to serve Him. I mean, it really felt that way, sure. But, I've had other illusions too in my day. The fact that you have an experience doesn't show that it's true. I've also thought that, somebody's coat was black when it was really blue when I was looking at it from far away or in bad light. The fact that you have an experience that leads you to a certain belief doesn't show that you're justified in having that belief unless the experience is a reliable indicator of the truth. And the problem with the religious experience is that they occur in certain circumstances with your wind groups and you're singing songs and you're very emotional and you're looking for guidance and you want to believe in God. And that's when you have the experiences. Priests know this and ministers know this. They get the emotions flowing in the church services and in their talks with individuals outside the church services. And you get the emotions flowing, you get the desires going, and people will have these experiences. It just doesn't show anything about the truth of what exists outside of those experiences.
Well, and you look at all the different kinds of religious experiences, coincidentally, they all occur within the same content formulations of the group in which they occur. The religious experiences in Hindu groups have a Hindu characteristic, and in Buddhist groups a Buddhist characteristic, and Christian groups that kind of characteristic, and each one has the kinds of God that the circumstances elicits.
Absolutely. Surprise, surprise. If you believe that God loves you and protects you, your religious experience will be one of safety and comfort. And if you believe that God is a jealous God who's going to send you to hell if you misbehave, and so you better misbehave, your religious experience is going to be tinged with fear in a different way.
And if your religious belief is such that there is no personal God, but there's this great cosmic consciousness, and that you'll merge with it, you'll suddenly have this feeling of oneness with the universe.
Yes, exactly. Although it's interesting, there's a wonderful brain study of that experience of oneness with the universe. There's a part of your brain that controls your proprioception, which means where your fingers are. If you close your eyes, you can still tell where your fingers are. And you're experiencing the edges of your body and you're aware of that. Well, when that part of the brain is not operating, you literally feel at one with the universe because you don't know where the edges of your body are. And so there can be explanations of these experiences, but that doesn't mean you're any more one with the universe than when you're not having that experience.
So, let's try to analyze why some very sophisticated philosophers will incorporate that argument into their train of thinking. What are the logical steps that they would use?
Well, as an atheist, I would like to say the reason they incorporate this argument is that the other ones don't work. But the logical steps that they use when they do incorporate the argument are basically, I have felt God's presence. There's no explanation of why I would feel that way, except if God were causing this experience. Or maybe the best explanation of why I feel that way is that God is causing this experience. Therefore, there must be a God who's causing me to feel the way I'm feeling.
And by the way, the arguments about different parts of the brain that cause religious experience seems to be fairly well documented in many different sources to be accurate in terms of the temporal lobe, and maybe people who have seizures have certain visions. And people from a religious perspective may not disagree with that, but say that that is how God either designed the brain or allowed evolution to develop this part, so that God became hardwired into the brain is not a proof that there's no such antecedent to that, but it could just as well prove that who that represents is something that was built into the system. Right. So you have a natural communication with God because of that center. I mean, you can argue it both ways.
But neither argument would be any good. It doesn't prove it one way or the other. Because it's just as good either direction. And when it's just as good either direction, you can't use religious experience to prove that God exists. You can't use it to prove that God does not exist either. But nobody's trying to do that. My point is simply you cannot use religious experience to prove that God does exist.
To be clear, it would be the argument about a brain a geography being responsible for the God feeling, that you could argue both ways in terms of it purely a naturalistic explanation or God having designed it into the system. The religious people who do incorporate the religious experience argument use that to nullify the argument against them. And they say at the end of the day, the residual, what I have in myself is the most convincing thing to me. When all the ontological, cosmological, teleological, all the arguments you want are all flushed out in however many books you want to do, I have my own internal religious experience which nobody can take away from me.
Right. And the same thing happens with visual experiences. I might say, I saw Ronald Reagan in Boston today. He must still be alive, or better, maybe Elvis Presley would be the one I should have mentioned. But I saw him today, and it just looked exactly like him. It was as clear as day.
That's because you're from Memphis.
He was there. Exactly. And other people will say, no, I don't see it. That doesn't look like Ronald Reagan at all to me, or maybe he's left. But it's going to be very difficult to convince me that it's not Ronald Reagan, because it looked just like Ronald Reagan to me. And so I have to step back and say, okay, it really did look that way to me. It seemed that way to me. That's what the experience was like for me. I'm being perfectly honest and sincere. But should I trust it? Sometimes I think things are black when they're really blue, or red when they're really orange, or many times I make perceptual errors and experiential errors. It sounds one way and it really was another way. You have to take a little critical perspective on your own experience and realize that you make mistakes and your experience doesn't always reveal the truth, especially under certain circumstances. And that's worth coming back to. Religious experiences occur in particular times and places when we wouldn't expect those experiences to be any different, whether they're true or false. It's like if you take drugs and you see pink elephants, you're not going to believe in pink elephants. Well, if you get very emotional in a church service and you've been trained up in a certain way and you're really looking for God, it shouldn't be any surprise that you have an experience that feels like God. But it shows no more about God than the pink elephants that you have on drugs show that there really is a pink elephant in the room.